I can heal your eyes." The words fell into the air like a stone dropped in still water, soft, almost fragile, but impossible to ignore. Daniel Mercer tilted his head toward the sound. His eyes, once sharp enough to read the smallest print of contracts worth billions, were now pale and clouded, holding nothing but darkness. He sat motionless on a cold iron bench in Central Heights Park, his fingers gripping the edges, as if the metal itself anchored him to the world. Around him, the park pulsed with a Houston afternoon children's laughter, the rustle of leaves in the wind, a car horn echoing faintly down a nearby street. He knew this place well, though not by sight anymore. His wife Evelyn brought him here almost every day. She guided him to this exact bench, set his cane by his side, and then drifted away, with the sound of her heels and the hush of her voice carrying into the distance. Always a phone call, always the same excuse. But today was different. The voice, small young female, came from his left. She had waited until Evelyn's footsteps faded past the hedge, until perfume and pretense no longer lingered in the air. Then she approached, quiet, careful, as if speaking to him was both urgent and dangerous. "What did you just say?" Daniel's voice was steady, but inside his heart stumbled. "I said, I can heal your eyes." He let out a breath that sounded more like a bitter laugh. "You can't imagine what's been tried. Surgeries, labs. My own company spent years pouring millions into technology that failed. And now a little girl thinks she can do what no one else has done." "I don't think," she said simply. "I know." Her voice wasn't mocking. There was no hesitation, no hint of fantasy. Just certainty. He turned slightly, trying to gauge her presence by sound. She was close. Too close for someone he hadn't even noticed until now. "Why would you say something like that to me?" Silence, and then a whisper, "Because I heard her." Daniel stiffened. "Heard who? The woman who brings you here," the girl said quietly. "Your wife." His hands froze against the bench. "I live near here." She continued, her words tumbling faster now. "Sometimes I sleep behind the coffee shop when it rains. I've seen you and her for months. She always leaves you on this bench. She always makes a call." And I listened. I didn't mean to at first. But I did. And I heard her. Daniel swallowed, the taste of bile rising in his throat. "What did she say?" "She said she did it." The girl's voice trembled not from fear, but from carrying too much truth for someone her age. "She said you were finally blind, and she was close to getting everything." Daniel's chest tightened. His breath faltered. Evelyn's careful routines, her calculated absence, her distant voice, all of it cracked open under this child's words. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to defend his wife, but the voice beside him was unflinching. And something inside him knew it wasn't a lie. "I don't know how she did it," the girl whispered. "But I think she wanted you helpless. Or gone." Daniel sat there, stunned into silence. "I didn't want to say anything when she was here," the girl added quickly. "She scares me. But I had to wait until she left. I had to make sure it was safe." And then, like smoke dissolving into air, she was gone. He heard only the faint scuff of worn shoes on the concrete. Moments later, Evelyn's perfume floated toward him. Her hand brushed his arm. "Time to go, darling." Daniel rose to his feet, but his mind stayed behind, with the words of a stranger who had seen more of his life than he had in months. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his leather armchair, high above the glittering sprawl of Houston's shadows thick around him. He replayed every syllable of the girl's voice, every pause, every shard of truth hidden in her trembling tone. Evelyn hadn't returned to their suite. She had left a note instead. Had to take a late call. Sleep well. Signed with her usual flourish, E. Daniel crumpled the note in his hand and let it fall to the floor. For decades he had commanded boardrooms, shifted markets, and made billion-dollar decisions with calm precision. Yet tonight, he sat sweating powerless, haunted by the thought that his greatest betrayal hadn't come from rivals or shareholders. It had come from the woman who shared his bed. The following morning, Evelyn acted as though nothing had changed. Her hands buttoned his shirt with efficient care, her voice breezy and pleasant. She mentioned meetings, clients, brunch with a partner, everything rehearsed, everything controlled. Then she asked softly, "Shall we go to the park again today?" "Yes," he said smoothly. "It's good for me." Her heels clicked against the marble hallway, too precise, too steady. At the park, she guided him to the bench, kissed his cheek, and said, "Back in a bit, love." Daniel waited. His palms were damp. His pulse thudded. He counted every second, every minute. He strained to hear past the laughter of children and the chirp of birds. And then faint, deliberate footsteps approached, light, almost barefoot. "You came back," Daniel murmured. "I told you I would," the girl said simply. "What's your name, Amara?" The name filled the air like a secret finally spoken. "How long have you been watching us? A while?" "No guilt, no shame, just honesty." Daniel swallowed. "I thought she cared for me." "Maybe she did," Amara said. "Once. But now she's planning something. She said once the board thinks you're incapable, she'll take over everything." Daniel's jaw clenched. He had felt it. He had sensed it. But hearing it confirmed by a child was different. It burned. "I don't want anything from you," Amara added quickly. "I just wanted you to know, to be ready." He turned toward her voice. "And you meant what you said yesterday, that you can help me?" "Yes." He almost laughed. "You're a child. What could you possibly—" "I don't mean doctors," she interrupted. "I don't have machines or medicine. But sometimes I feel things. I know things about people. I touched your wife once when she walked by, and I felt it, like poison in the air. She's lying to you." Daniel was silent. He wanted to dismiss it, to call it childish imagination. But there was something raw in her tone, something too steady to be fantasy. "You're scared," Amara said softly. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Maybe I am. I don't know if I can come back tomorrow," she whispered. She's starting to notice more. "Wait," he said quickly, reaching out. His hand brushed hers, small, warm reel. "If you don't come back, I won't know what to do." There was silence, and then her whisper, "Then I'll come. But you have to be ready, not just to see, but to believe." And like the day before, she vanished. When Evelyn returned, she asked sweetly, "Did you enjoy the quiet?" "Yes," Daniel said smoothly. But his hand slipped into his pocket, where he found a small stone wrapped in string, something Amara must have placed there without him noticing. He held it tight, its texture grounding him in a way nothing else had for months. That night, Daniel didn't return home right away. He asked the driver to stop near the old Bayou Bridge. He needed silence, the kind that didn't come from wealth or marble walls, but from choices made long ago. He thought about Evelyn, how once she had held his hand, the way Amara did now, before ambition hardened her touch into habit. He pressed the stone against his palm and wondered if maybe blindness hadn't stolen his sight. It had revealed what he refused to see for years. For the first time in a long time, Daniel Mercer felt something stir in the dark. Not fear, not despair, but a spark. A spark lit by a girl who had nothing yet, gave him everything he thought he had lost perspective. And tomorrow, he knew everything would change. The morning broke gray and damp with the kind of drizzle that blurred glass towers into ghostly outlines. Evelyn sighed as she tugged her suede shoes from the closet. Houston rain ruins everything, she muttered more to herself than to him. Daniel said nothing. He just listened, the shuffle of her clothes, the sharp snap of the umbrella, the faint irritation she hadn't bothered to hide. Her care felt more like choreography these days, precise but hollow. In the car, silence stretched between them. He could hear her scrolling on her phone, the faint buzz of incoming texts, the soft huff of laughter that wasn't shared with him. At the park, she hesitated. "It's wet. Do you want to skip it today?" "No," Daniel said too quickly. "I'd rather go." A pause, then with a saccharine tone, "All right, just don't catch cold." She led him to the bench, brushed off the rain with a cloth from her handbag, and set his cane at his side. 15 minutes, she said, and walked toward her usual spot near the hedge. Daniel sat with the drizzle needling his skin, the chill biting at his collar. But he didn't care. He reached into his coat pocket and traced the stone Amara had left him yesterday. Its texture reminded him of something solid, grounding, something not bought or manipulated. Then he heard it, the careful shuffle of small shoes avoiding puddles. "You came?" he said softly without turning. "I promised," Amara replied. "Besides, the rain slows people down, makes them notice me less." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're clever." She sat beside him, quiet at first, as if letting the rhythm of rain fill the silence. Then she asked, "Can I ask you something strange? Stranger than a little girl telling a blind man she can heal him?" She giggled. "Fair point." He waited. "Have you ever felt light?" she asked. Daniel tilted his head. "Felt it, not seen it, yes. Like warmth moving through you. Not in your eyes, but in your chest." He thought for a moment. "Maybe once. Years ago when my son was born. I remember holding him and feeling something open inside me. Like sunlight through a window I didn't know existed." Amara nodded as though she understood exactly. "That's it." He didn't ask how she could understand something so abstract. He just accepted that she did. "I think people carry light," she continued. "Some lose it, some never find it. Some burn bright and then go out. And me?" he asked quietly. "Yours is steady, buried. But it's there." Her words lingered in the air, like truth spoken into a cathedral. For the first time in months, Daniel laughed softly, a sound that startled even him. She leaned closer. "Your wife. She isn't just taking your company. She's afraid of you getting better. Because if you do, you might leave her." The thought stabbed deep, one he'd refused to let surface before. He said nothing. "What do you want from all this, Amara?" he asked instead. She was quiet for a long time. Then, in a voice almost too small to catch, "Maybe I just want to matter to someone. Even for a little while." He turned toward her voice, his chest tightening. "You already do." She didn't reply. Instead, she reached for his hand. "I want to try something. Trust me." Without hesitation, he opened his palm. She clasped it between her two small hands, firm but gentle. "Close your eyes." He almost chuckled at the irony, but obeyed. "Now breathe. Think of that moment you told me about your son and that light." He inhaled slowly, and as he did, something shifted. Not a miracle, not a vision, but a presence. The rain faded. The sounds dulled. And for the first time in years, he felt a quiet peace fill the hollow inside him. When he opened his eyes, he was crying. I didn't see anything, he whispered, but I felt peace. "That's a start," Amara said gently. He squeezed her hand, grateful. But then she stiffened. "She's watching today?" she murmured. Daniel tensed. Evelyn. Yes. I can feel her. Her light flickers when I'm near. It gets cold. He didn't fully understand, but he didn't need to. He just knew Amara was right. Within moments, Evelyn's heels clicked briskly across the stone path. Her voice was sharp, almost scolding. Daniel, you're soaked. Why didn't you call me? He didn't answer. She wrapped a blanket around his shoulders with exaggerated care. You'll catch pneumonia out here. As she steadied him, he asked softly, Why don't you ever sit with me anymore? She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. Then with practiced ease, she said, Because you need quiet. Space to think. Daniel nodded slowly, but her answer felt rehearsed, another mask layered over the truth. The next morning, he woke with a strange determination. His body still ached from the damp, but there was a pulse inside him now, a need to move to reclaim something beyond sitting silently on a bench. When they reached the park, he said firmly, I'd like to walk today. Evelyn faltered. It's still wet. Are you sure I am? Her fingers pressed his shoulder briefly, then released. Don't go far. I'll be over by the hedge. Daniel took his cane and began to walk. The stones were uneven, the roots pushing up through cracks. Each step was deliberate, measured. He tuned himself to every sound, the flutter of pigeons, the breeze rattling leaves. Then faint but clear, he heard her. Amara, singing softly under her breath somewhere nearby. He angled toward the sound, but in that instant, a child screamed with laughter nearby. Daniel's cane slipped into a shallow dip between stones. His foot caught. His balance pitched forward violently. Impact. Pain seared through his wrist as he hit the ground. His hips slammed into the edge of a step, breath exploding from his lungs. For a moment, the world was only pain, humiliation, and the harsh reminder of his fragility. Mr. Mercer, Amara's voice rang out sharp with urgency. Small hands touched his back, then his arm. Don't move yet. I saw you fall. I'm fine, he muttered. No, you're not. Your wrist's swollen. You're bleeding. She helped him sit up against the cold stone base of an old monument. Her touch was steady, practiced, too mature for her age. She pressed a folded cloth, probably pulled from her sleeve, against his palm to stop the bleeding. You didn't see the dip, she said gently. That's not stupid. That's just real. Despite the pain, Daniel gave a dry chuckle. You're too honest for your age, and you're too proud for yours, she shot back. The words cut sharper than the fall. Before he could respond, the rapid staccato of Evelyn's heels shattered the air. Daniel, my God, what happened? Amara vanished swift as a shadow behind a bench. Daniel straightened, swallowing pain. I tripped, misjudged the path. Evelyn was instantly at his side, fussing with exaggerated concern. I told you this path isn't safe. You shouldn't have walked alone. I needed to move, he said quietly. We're going home. Right now. Her tone left no room for argument. This is too much. I should have hired someone. She helped him up, her grip too firm, too controlling. He clenched his teeth against the pain. Back at the house, Evelyn called a doctor. Daniel, alone in his study afterward, opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out an old recorder. He pressed the button. This is Daniel Mercer, he said, voice low but firm. If anyone declares me unfit mentally or physically, I want this on record. I have not lost my mind. I may have lost my sight, but I have not lost my will. He paused, fingers trembling around the recorder. And I am not alone. There is a girl named Amara. She is real, and she sees more clearly than anyone else in my life. He clicked it off and slipped it back into the drawer. Then he reached for the small stone Amara had given him, turning it over in his bruised palm. The fall had hurt, but it had also taught him something vital. The only thing worse than falling was refusing to get up, and Daniel Mercer was done staying down. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the air damp and cool, the scent of wet earth clinging to the city. Daniel rose slowly from his bed, bruises still throbbing across his hip. Evelyn had left early, heels clicking down the hallway before dawn, muttering something about an emergency board meeting. No gentle goodbye, no checking in, just the soft slam of the door. Daniel dressed himself for the first time in months. It took twice as long, buttons slipping, sleeves uneven, but when he finally fastened his coat, he felt something he hadn't in years control. When the driver Miguel pulled the car around, Daniel insisted on walking down the steps without help. "I've got it," he told him. And though the stone steps wobbled under his cane, he made it down on his own. "Where to?" Sister Miguel asked. "Central Heights Park, west entrance." He arrived 20 minutes early. The park was hushed, the city still shaking off its sleep. For a long time, he sat alone, the morning sun warming his face. Then he heard them footsteps, not Amara's light shuffle. These were heavier, deliberate, the crunch of work boots on damp gravel. The bench groaned as another body settled beside him. "You're Daniel Mercer," the man said after a moment. His voice was rough like gravel dragged across stone. Daniel inclined his head. "I am. She told me you might not believe me." Daniel's lips tightened. "Try me." The man let out a breath. "I'm not a doctor. I'm not a priest. I don't fix people. I find things, truth, motives, weak spots. A detective, no. A bitter laugh. Worse. I used to work for people like your wife." That made Daniel straighten. "What do you mean I was an enabler?" the man said flatly. "I buried secrets for the wealthy. I hid fraud, laundered money, destroyed evidence. They paid me well to make ugly things disappear. And now I try to stop it before it goes too far. I owe the universe some balance." Daniel's jaw clenched. "So what did Evelyn hire you for?" The man hesitated. 2 years ago, she came to my firm, wanted intel on your board, dirt on shareholders, called it contingency planning. I left before I took the job, but I remembered the name Mercer." Silence stretched between them. Daniel's chest tightened. The man continued. "A few weeks ago, a little girl showed up at a food pantry where I volunteer. Sharp as hell. Asked questions. Said her friend was in trouble. That's how I found you." "Amara," Daniel said softly. "Yeah. Brave kid. Too brave." Daniel took a breath. "And you?" "What do you want now?" "Call me Harris," the man said simply. "And I want to help you stop her. I've already started." Daniel turned his head toward him. How Harris shifted the bench, creaking. "Your wife has been moving funds. Small transfers at first, then larger ones. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, all under names tied back to her lawyer, Carl Ramsey. He's a shark ex-corporate fraud. She's setting you up for a declaration of incompetence. The pills she's been giving you, they're part of it. Sedatives, enough to make you seem confused, disoriented, even paranoid." Daniel's breath came sharp. "You're saying she's building a case against me?" "She already has the paperwork drafted. At most, you've got 2 weeks before she files." Daniel clenched his fists around his cane. "So what do we do?" "You need a lawyer who works for you, not her. I know one discreet aggressive doesn't flinch at corporate warfare. Her name's Claire Dalton. And in the meantime, you act normal. Let Evelyn think you're still half broken. Let her get confident. Meanwhile, we build your case." Daniel swallowed. And Amara, she shouldn't be involved any further. She's a child. Harris's voice softened for the first time. She's already involved, and she's tougher than you think. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the chirp of birds. Finally, Daniel said, "All right, then let's fight." Harris stood, boots crunching against the gravel. That's what I needed to hear. He paused, lowering his voice. "One more thing. That nurse Evelyn hired Jennifer, she isn't who she says she is. Watch her." And then he was gone. Moments later, Daniel heard lighter steps approaching. Familiar. Amara. "You met him," she said, sliding onto the bench beside him. "I did." "Harris." She grinned. "He's intense." Daniel chuckled. "That's one word for it. He's kind, too. Just doesn't know how to show it." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the world move around them. A dog barked in the distance. A bike chain rattled. Daniel turned toward her. "Amara, I don't want you in danger because of me." She shrugged. "Neither should you." "But here we are." His chest tightened. "I've got a war coming." She nodded, her voice small but certain. "Then you've got soldiers now?" He reached into his pocket, feeling the stone she'd given him. Solid. Real. And for the first time, Daniel Mercer didn't feel like he was facing the darkness alone. That night, Evelyn returned home later than usual. Her heels clicked sharp against the marble floor as she entered his study unannounced. "You've seemed unsettled since the fall," she said sweetly. "Maybe we should consider other options. There's a facility in Austin. Comfortable, quiet. They specialize in care for men like you." Daniel kept his voice calm. "Men like me." She smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Men who've done enough, who deserve rest. I could oversee the company while you recover." He let the silence hang heavy and deliberate. Finally, he said, "I'll think about it." But when she left, his jaw tightened. He walked to his desk, opened the drawer, and clicked on the recorder. "This is Daniel Mercer." She's accelerating her plan, suggesting permanent care. I won't step down. Not while I have my mind. Not while I have allies. He pressed stop, then reached for the small medal Harris had slipped him earlier that day, a St. Lucy's medal patron saint of the blind. He let it rest against his chest, cool and solid. Not all light came from sight. Some came from faith, and some came from a girl with nothing to her name but courage. The next morning, Daniel walked into Central Heights Park, taller than he had in months. His bruises still ached, but his steps were firmer, steadier. He touched the metal beneath his shirt with each stride, like a compass. Amara was already waiting, perched on the bench with a cup of oatmeal in her lap. "You look different," she said. "I am," he answered simply. She smiled. "Then it's beginning." And Daniel Mercer knew his silence had ended. The law office didn't look like much from the outside, just a brick townhouse wedged between a florist and a bail bondsman on a quiet street downtown. No polished marble floors, no gleaming glass tower. But when Daniel Mercer stepped through its narrow doorway, leaning slightly on his cane, but walking taller than ever, he felt the weight of a turning tide. The receptionist guided him down a short hallway into a room lined with law books and heavy wooden furniture. Behind a desk piled high with papers sat Claire Dalton, sharp chin streaks of silver in her dark hair eyes that seemed to pierce through everything. "Mr. Mercer," she said, standing and shaking his hand firmly. "It's an honor." Daniel gave a faint smile. "I'm not sure honor is the word. I'm blind, bruised, and apparently one signature away from losing my life's work." Claire's lips curved into a wry smile. "But you're still standing. That counts for more than you know." They got to business quickly. Harris had already provided her with recordings and financial trails. Claire spread out documents on the desk, bank statements, emails, transcripts of Evelyn's phone calls. Every piece was a nail hammered into Evelyn's coffin. "She's meticulous," Claire said, flipping through the files. "She's been planting seeds for over a year, manipulated medical reports, revisions to power of attorney forms, quiet conversations with board members. She's building a picture of you as incompetent." Daniel listened silently, fingers pressing into the polished oak of the desk. "But here's what she didn't count on," Claire continued. "You have an unexpected witness. That little girl, Amara." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I won't put her in danger. She's already in it, Mr. Mercer," Claire replied firmly. "And her testimony is powerful. Judges and boards listen when a child speaks with clarity, especially when it exposes truth adults have tried to bury." Daniel let the silence stretch. Finally, he nodded. "I'll talk to her." Claire leaned forward. "Good. Because we need to move fast. We'll file a countersuit duress medical coercion manipulation. We'll serve an injunction freezing any further asset transfers. And then we'll call a private meeting with the board. Confront her before she files her petition." Daniel took a deep breath. "And when she lashes out," Claire's eyes flashed, "that's when we'll have her." That evening, Daniel returned to the estate. Evelyn was waiting in the parlor, her voice sugar-sweet. "How are you feeling, darling?" she asked, brushing his shoulder, as if the gesture were still intimate. "Better," he said evenly. "You know," she began, her tone casual but rehearsed, "if this is all too much, there are other options. Places where you'd be cared for, where I could manage things while you rest." Daniel tilted his head toward her voice. "What would happen to the company then?" "Oh, just temporarily," she said smoothly, "until you're settled." He let the silence hang, then gave her a thin smile. "I'll consider it." But that night in his study, Daniel turned on the recorder. "This is Daniel Mercer. She's accelerating her plan. Suggesting I step down permanently. I won't. Not while I still have my mind. Not while I still have Amara." He placed the recorder back into the drawer beside the St. Lucy's medal. The cool metal against his chest steadied him. The following day, Evelyn made her move. She marched into the boardroom flanked by her lawyer, Carl Ramsey, a man with slicked-back hair and a reputation as ruthless as hers. She smiled at the board chair and announced Daniel's decline. She presented medical reports, a schedule of confusion episodes, testimony from Nurse Jennifer about Daniel's paranoia. But Daniel had already filed the injunction. Claire Dalton stormed in with her own stack of files, offshore accounts, hidden transfers, recordings of Evelyn's calls. She slapped them on the table with a force that echoed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Claire said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "What you have here isn't a loving wife protecting her husband. It's embezzlement, it's coercion, and it's fraud." The board shifted uneasily. Eyes flicked from Evelyn's calm smile to the pile of damning evidence Claire spread before them. Finally, the chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Mercer, you may speak." Daniel rose slowly, resting one hand lightly on the back of his chair. His voice was clear, steady. "For months I've been silent," he began. "Partly because of illness. Partly because I trusted the wrong person to speak for me. But that ends today." He turned his head toward Evelyn. "Someone I trusted, someone I loved, worked behind closed doors to declare me unfit. Not because I am, but because my presence was inconvenient to her ambition." Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she kept her smile fixed. Daniel continued. "She built a case on manipulated evidence, on sedatives disguised as medication, and on silence. But I will not be silent anymore. I may be blind, but I see more clearly now than I ever have. And what I see is betrayal. Gasps echoed softly across the room. Claire laid out the documents one by one, the money trails, the doctored reports, the recordings Evelyn had never imagined would be heard by anyone else. "And I have a witness," Daniel said firmly. At Claire's cue, Amara stepped into the boardroom. She looked impossibly small in the shadow of the long oval table, but her eyes shone steady. "I'm Amara," she said, her voice clear, childlike, but unwavering. "I saw Mrs. Mercer bring him to the park every day. I heard her say things, that he was finally blind, that she'd get everything. She wasn't protecting him. She was waiting for him to disappear." The board members leaned in, every face taut with shock. Evelyn's composure faltered, her hand twitching on the table. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and held up the small recorder. "And I have her words on tape." The board chair rapped the table. "Enough. We will deliberate." Silence thickened as Daniel sat back down. Evelyn didn't look at him as she gathered her papers. Her smile had cracked, but her eyes burned with quiet fury. When the meeting ended, Daniel stepped into the sunlight outside the building. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt like breath. Amara tugged at his sleeve. "You did it." "No," he said softly. "We did it." She grinned wide and proud, but Claire's voice was stern when she joined them. "Don't celebrate too soon. She'll fight back harder now. The board may be swayed, but Evelyn isn't done. She'll take this public if she has to." Daniel touched the metal beneath his shirt. "Then let her. For once the truth is on my side." That evening, Evelyn returned home long after dusk. She walked into his study without knocking, her voice colder than ever. "You think you've won something, Daniel?" she hissed. Daniel set down his pen and folded his hands. "I think I've stopped losing." Her heels clicked sharply across the carpet. "You've exposed us both. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "No," he said calmly. "I've exposed you." Her silence was sharper than her words. For the first time, she had no ready answer. Daniel sat still long after she stormed out. Not because he was afraid, but because she hadn't denied it. Not once. And that silence was all the proof he needed. The storm broke on a Thursday morning. Headlines splashed across the business pages. Billionaire Daniel Mercer declares war on his own wife. Every outlet had the story. Photos of Daniel in his tailored suit, his cane gleaming like a sword, stepping into the courthouse with Claire Dalton at his side. Evelyn trailed behind in dark sunglasses, lips tight arm hooked in that of Carl Ramsey. The city buzzed. Some saw Daniel as tragic, others as reckless, but everyone watched. Inside the courthouse, the air smelled of old wood and electricity, like storms held in waiting. Reporters whispered furiously as Daniel took his seat at the plaintiff's table, Amara quietly perched in the back row with Harris. The little girl's hands were folded neatly, but her eyes darted around the room, missing nothing. When the judge entered, the tension broke like a taut rope. Mercer versus Mercer, the bailiff announced. Claire Dalton rose, her voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "Your Honor, this is a case not about guardianship, but about fraud. My client Daniel Mercer was targeted by his own spouse through coercion, medical manipulation, and calculated deceit. We will show evidence of sedatives disguised as treatment-forged documents, offshore accounts, and recorded conversations that leave no doubt of intent." Carl Ramsey countered his words, slick as oil. "What we have here is a sick man's paranoia, fanned by opportunists. Mr. Mercer has declined in health. Mrs. Mercer, his loving wife, has only sought to protect him. We will show he is unfit to oversee his estate, unfit to run his company, and in need of care, he refuses. The judge's eyes narrowed. Proceed. Evelyn took the stand first. She played her part, well-concerned wife, hands, folded eyes shimmering as if on cue. He doesn't know what he says half the time, she told the court. He forgets. He accuses me of things I would never dream of. I've only ever tried to help him. Her lawyer guided her through rehearsed questions. She painted herself as a martyr, tethered to a failing man. For a moment, it almost worked. Then Claire called Amara. The courtroom hushed as the little girl walked slowly to the stand. The clerk swore her in with gentle words, and Amara looked out at the sea of adults, powerful people, lawyers, strangers, but her gaze went straight to Daniel. He nodded once. Amara's voice was small but clear. I saw Mrs. Mercer at the park. She told someone she was glad Mr. Mercer was blind now because she could take everything. She said he'd finally stop asking questions. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Evelyn's jaw snapped tight. And how did Mr. Mercer treat you? Amara Claire asked softly. He listened, she said. Even though he couldn't see, he saw me better than anyone. He told me stories. He gave me this medal. She touched the chain around her neck. He said light belongs to everyone. Silence followed, pure, heavy, undeniable. Claire let it hang before she pressed play on the recorder. Evelyn's voice filled the room. He's finished. Once the doctors sign, I'll own it all. Finally. No one moved. The mask Evelyn wore so carefully shattered under the sound of her own words. The judge's gavel cracked. Enough. The verdict came swiftly. Evelyn Mercer's petitions were denied. Instead, she faced charges of fraud, coercion, and attempted misappropriation. The board convened an emergency session that same evening, removing her from any claim to Mercer Enterprises. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps as deputies escorted Evelyn out in handcuffs. She kept her head high, but her silence screamed louder than any protest. Daniel stepped into the sunlight, cane tapping the stone steps, Harris steady at his side. Cameras flashed, questions flew, but he paused only once long enough for microphones to catch his words. I may have lost my sight, he said, but I never lost my vision. Today, truth carried the light. The quote blazed across headlines the next morning. Weeks later, Daniel stood in the same boardroom where Evelyn had once tried to destroy him. The chairwoman raised her glass. To Mr. Mercer, proof that strength doesn't depend on sight. Applause echoed around the room, but Daniel lifted his hand for quiet. This company has always been about building futures, he said. But I've realized something. Futures aren't built in glass towers alone. They're built in streets, in schools, in children who refuse to be invisible. He gestured gently toward Amara, who sat shyly at the edge of the room, a ribbon in her hair. Because of her, I stand here today. And because of her, I know what comes next. Claire Dalton stepped forward, holding a stack of documents. We filed the charter, she announced. The Light We Carry Foundation, dedicated to supporting children who've been silenced, neglected, or overlooked. Funded entirely by Daniel Mercer's personal endowment. Applause thundered again. Amara beamed. Daniel touched the medal at his chest and whispered, Your light, child, not mine alone. The following Sunday, the first foundation event took place at the same city park where it all began. Volunteers set up tents and tables. Families gathered. Children laughed, running across the grass. Daniel sat on a bench beneath the oak tree, listening. Harris described the scene: balloons tied to railings, music from a local band, a banner stretched high, the Light We Carry Foundation. Opening day. Amara ran to him, tugging his sleeve. You have to hear this, she said, dragging him toward the stage. When he stepped up, the crowd fell quiet. "I can't see you," Daniel said, smiling faintly. "But I can hear you. And I can tell you this, you matter. Every child here, every voice. I once thought a blindness would end my life. Instead, it opened my eyes. You've taught me that light isn't what we keep. It's what we give." Cheers rose, swelling like an anthem. Daniel tilted his head toward the sky. For the first time in a long time, he didn't think of loss. He thought of beginnings, and in that moment, with Amara's small hand clutching his, he felt the truth settle deep and unshakable. He wasn't blind. Not anymore.